Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Drew, better known as RockChalk01, and I'm here to...
Get out!
Oh, I thought I could do the intro. Sorry.
No! Let me do my job! And now I've lost my train of thought. Oh wait, I remember. If you remember a video a while back, I did KU versus every FBS opponent. Well, I thought I'd expand it a little bit and go conference-wide. So, welcome to the Big 12 versus the FBS simulator.
Astro, no.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Drew, better known as RockChalk01, and welcome to the Big 12 versus the FBS simulator. Now, before I get started, I do want to point this out that the games that actually did happen during the past football season, which was 2022, those are going to be untouched. They'll be left alone and they will stand as whatever they are, either wins or losses. Put this as a little asterisk. If a team played each other twice and they split, I gave both teams their respective wins and left out the losses. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, but without further ado, gonna have to give me a long time to get this all figured out. So give me a sec.
6 months later.
And done. Whew. Now, before I get started, I do want to say that this is kind of a ranking video, if you want to put it lightly, but I am going to go through each team's record and rank them from worst to best. Also, this is going to be 14 teams, so this will include the 4 expansion programs along with the 2 schools that are departing. But without further ado, let's rank them. So starting off this rankings list, we've got one of our expansion teams, which kind of doesn't surprise me, but the team does, and that is Houston. Now, they did finish above 500, but they were poor against the Big 12, as their overall win-loss record was 76 wins and 52 losses, also going 3-10 against the Big 12. I mean, let's start with the losses. They barely lost to Arizona, and that was a 42-41 ball game. Got blown out by Florida State 56-7. They lost to South Alabama 23-17, and they lost to Southern Miss 13-6. They almost upset UCLA 38-37, and they almost upset USC 25-24. Now, don't get me wrong, they also have some impressive wins as well. They beat Clemson by 4, 23-19.
23-19! We have a 23-19!
They upset Nebraska 28-21. They beat Wake Forest by 5, 35-30. And they also beat Wisconsin 14-3. I mean, it kind of sucks that they had some boneheaded defeats because some of these wins look really good on paper, but that just didn't show up on the record. So unfortunately, Houston finished last in the Big 12. All right, next up at number 13, we have yet another expansion program. This time we head to the East Coast, and it's UCF. Now, they did much better in terms of a win-loss record because they're the first team that is under 50 losses, which really doesn't say much. Also, their record against Big 12 opponents was better as well. UCF finished with a record of 79 wins and 49 losses, including a 5-8 record against Big 12 opponents. Let's start with one that really surprises me, Air Force. The first game that wasn't a conference opponent or wasn't a part of the 2022 season, they lose. They lost that one 17-16. They also have another boneheaded loss against Georgia Southern. They lose that one in a high-scoring affair, 44-40. They lose to Troy by 7, 41-34. And then they lose to Western Kentucky, 41-27, and then get thumped by Wisconsin, 51-20. However, these guys still had some impressive wins. I mean, they beat Arizona State by 3, 34-31. And then they come out of scenic nowhere and beat LSU 30-7. So yeah, a little bit more variety where it comes to upsetting teams, but a lot of the group of 5 teams that they play, it's somewhat more of squeakers. And then the teams that they actually lost to, it was more on the verge of blowouts. But they do finish with a better record than Houston did. So they do end up finishing in 13th place. All right, number 12 is our first mainstay here in the Big 12, and that is Iowa State. And their conference record didn't help them either. Overall, Iowa State finished with a record of 80 wins and 48 losses, and a 3-10 record versus the Big 12. They get thumped by Alabama 62-14. They also get upset by Kent State 37-31, and then they get thumped by Louisville 44-6. And the final two losses have weird, ridiculous scorelines. They lose to Western Kentucky 13-5, and then they lose to Wisconsin by a final score of 6-0. But they do have some impressive wins, I'm not going to lie. They blow out Arizona State 33-7. These next ones kind of make no sense as they beat Ole Miss comfortably 31-14. They escape Mississippi State's grasp 24-17. And they upset Nebraska 24-21. They thump Virginia Tech 44-14. And they thump Washington 52-27. Iowa State had some quality wins over Power 5 programs, but there was more Power 5 losses as well as Group of 5 losses that Iowa State had, and it really hurt them. And this is where they ended up. But they do end up being the worst current Big 12 team before the expansion teams get involved. So, yeah, Iowa State's here at number 12. All right, number 11 is a team that really surprises me that they did this poorly, as they're one of the more top-tier programs in college football, but they had one bad year, and apparently it tarnished them. And that's Oklahoma State. And the conference record is the best we've seen so far, as Oklahoma State finished with an overall record of 81 wins and 47 losses, including a 7-6 record versus the Big 12. Now, games of notable. They almost squeaked out a win over Alabama, but the Crimson Tide prevail 31-26. They almost upset Florida, but it goes in the Gators' favor 34-30, as well as getting upset by Fresno State by 4, 23-19.
23-19! We have a 23-19!
They also lose to USC by 1, 35-34. Wake Forest by 4, 27-23. And they lose to Wyoming by 9, 16-7. But don't get me wrong, they still have some impressive wins. I mean, they beat Arkansas 37-31 in a tight game. They upset Ole Miss 27-19. And they absolutely thumped Missouri 58-10, which, good job, Oklahoma State, you did well. They squeaked by UAB 38-31. And they also beat Louisiana Monroe 38-34. Another squeaker. And if you think about it, we as media and fans of football, we really overlooked Oklahoma State because they were not that good this year. In fact, the simulator proved that they weren't as good as what people thought of, and then some. So it sucks to see Oklahoma State have this huge fall from grace. However, I would say it's a bonus that they didn't finish last. So, yeah, Oklahoma State is here in 11th place. All right, next up we got number 10, and it's yet another expansion program that finishes in the bottom half of the conference. And yeah, this kind of surprises me because this team had a really good season, but then just had a huge fall from grace when you look at this and do simulations. That team was Cincinnati. And I mean, they also did okay against the Big 12, but their overall record was kind of their downfall. Cincinnati finished with a record of 82 wins and 46 losses, including a 4-9 record against the Big 12. Some notable games. Let's start with the losses. 2 one-point games that they lose to. The first one was to App State, as they lose that one 23-22. They get absolutely thumped by the national champion Georgia Bulldogs 42-12. They lose to the Michigan Wolverines by 1, 13-12. That really surprises me. And some more bonehead losses. They lose to San Diego State 20-6 and San Jose State 20-19. But the wins they've got, I mean, some of them are really surprising. I mean, they've got a few squeakers, which really don't make sense. First squeaker of notable, they barely beat Akron. They only win by 5, 22-17. They upset Boston College by 3, 16-13. They also beat Florida State by 8, 42-34. And then this one's just funny. They played Nebraska, and they not only won against the Cornhuskers, they shut them out in blowout fashion by a score of 38-0. They beat the Ohio State Buckeyes 33-28. They beat Syracuse by 4, 20-16. And they beat Texas A&M by 14, 31-17. I thought the expansion teams would do a little bit better. I mean, 2 of them did, 2 of them didn't. But I thought most of them would be around the 80 to 85 win column. And yeah, 2 of them fell short, but Cincinnati is the first to do it, which I give them bonus points for that. But still, the fact is that they finished in the bottom half of the conference. I thought Cincinnati would do a little bit better, but hey, at least they did better than a few other teams. So yeah, with that said, Cincinnati finished in 10th place. All right, number 9, we've got another mainstay of the conference. And this one kind of surprises me because these guys were the head honchos of the Big 12 for a few years. But then they've had a somewhat fall from grace this last season. And yeah, I thought they would do a little bit better, but in a way, they're more towards the middle of the pack. At number 9, I've got Baylor. Now, the Bears did a couple games better than Cincinnati did, but they did so much better when it came to the Big 12. Baylor finished with a record of 84 wins and 44 losses, including a 7-6 record versus the Big 12. Now, games of noticeable. I mean, the state of Arizona was not good to Baylor as both Arizona schools beat them, as Arizona won by 2, 27-25, and Arizona State won by 4 in what seems like a basketball score. That was 62-58. They get thumped by Georgia 66-7. They lost to Penn State by 3, 31-28. They lost to Pitt by 8, 37-29. And they also lose to Stanford by 8, 28-20. Now to their wins. I mean, they actually have some decent wins. I mean, they beat Cal 30-27. They upset Florida by 9, 25-16. They beat Mississippi State by 4, 34-30. They thumped North Carolina 44-17. They squeaked by Notre Dame 35-31. They upset USC 24-23. They barely get by Vanderbilt 34-31. And they also get by Wisconsin 21-17. So yeah, more impressive wins that Baylor had, but they got more over the group of 5 teams and in comfortable fashion. But there's still some crazy losses that this Baylor team had that really surprises me, especially since they were one of the heads in terms of winning the conference. They're out of the double-digit seeds as they finish in 9th place. All right, number 8, we actually have the best performing expansion program. And judging by that I've done already 3 of them, this is the 4th one. So number 8, I've got BYU. Now, when it comes to the Cougars, I thought they would kind of struggle, but they kind of surprised me, especially how well they did against the Big 12. BYU finished with a record of 85 wins and 43 losses, including a 5-8 record against the Big 12. Now to games of notice, let's take a look at the losses first. They lose to Boston College by 8, 28-20. They get thumped by Florida 45-20. And they also get thumped by Georgia 49-6. They also lost to Missouri by 21. They got beat by North Carolina by 21. They also get creamed by Penn State by a final score of 64-30. They almost beat the Tennessee Volunteers, but come up 1 point short. They lose that one 28-27. They also lose to UT San Antonio 19-17 as well. Now to the wins of notice, as they beat Arizona State 34-31. They win comfortably over Illinois, and in blowout fashion, they win 48-16, and they upset LSU comfortably 31-20. And the last 2 wins of notice are big upsets, as they upset USC 38-24, and they also upset Utah in a close one 42-38. Now, BYU, I know they can beat some of these teams. In fact, I think they should have beat more teams than what their record shows. But hey, that's a good, strong performance from a team that is coming into a conference since they haven't been one in I don't know how long. So yeah, even though they finished here towards the bottom half of the Big 12, they're getting closer to that middle tier of the conference. And yeah, with that said, BYU finishes in 8th. All right, so at number 7, we got a team who really didn't have a good year in 2022, but somehow, some way, was one of the simulator's best teams. And yeah, they finished towards the middle of the pack, but this surprises me anyway, and that's West Virginia. Also, they did surprisingly well against Big 12 opponents, which that's crazy enough. West Virginia finished with a record of 87 wins and 41 losses, including a 6-7 record against the Big 12. Now, games of notice, let's start with those losses, and a few of these are double-digit losses that kind of surprise me. They lost to Arizona State by 17, 48-31. They lost to Auburn by 13, 26-13. Some more boneheaded losses as they lose to Florida Atlantic 27-14, Fresno State by 3, 33-30, and they lose to Georgia Southern by 5, 24-19. And now here comes the more devastating losses. They lose to Nebraska by 17, 30-13, get thumped by North Carolina 33-3, get absolutely thumped by Ohio State 69-24, and get thumped by Oregon 38-21. Now to their surprising wins, and here's the most surprising win probably in the entire video, until we get to probably KU, which that's probably crazy enough. West Virginia not only did this, but they won comfortably. They beat the Alabama Crimson Tide 42-27. They also beat Clemson 26-17, and they beat the national champion Georgia Bulldogs 38-35. Let's see. They also beat the Miami Hurricanes 17-16, and they beat the Michigan Wolverines 34-27. But now here comes the squeaker wins. They squeaked by Rutgers 16-13. They squeaked by San Diego State 23-16. They win a 1-point game over Troy 17-16, and they squeaked by UCLA 27-24. I mean, I don't understand how West Virginia did this well. I thought West Virginia would do terrible just based on how well their season went. That was clearly not the case. West Virginia not only beat impressive teams, they beat Alabama, which probably should have been a playoff team. They beat Michigan, who was a playoff team, and they beat Georgia, who was the national champion. But again, some of their other losses that they had really outweighed the wins. And yeah, I mean, good job for West Virginia not sucking too bad and finishing in the top half of the Big 12. And yeah, West Virginia finishes in 7th place. All right, next up at number 6, we have our first team to reach 90 victories on this list, which, yeah, that took a long time before someone hit the magic number of 90. But this team, this one kind of makes sense that they had this record, and this would be Texas Tech. I mean, the Red Raiders impressed the heck out of me this season after I thought they wouldn't do as great, but still, really good performance by the Red Raiders, including a pretty solid conference record as well. Texas Tech finished with a record of 92 wins and 36 losses, including a 7-6 record versus the Big 12. Some notable losses: they get absolutely thumped by Alabama 54-21. They had a squeak loss over Florida State 31-30, but then they get absolutely tramped by Georgia 41-14. And then you got some more close losses, but the final 3 losses they had were to Power 5 programs, as they lose to USC by 4, 45-41, Utah by 4, 35-31, and Vanderbilt by 7, 20-13. Now to their notable wins. I mean, the first couple are squeakers. They beat Akron by 6, Arizona by 4, Army by 7, and Boise State by 3. More squeakers. They beat Florida Atlantic by 7, 27-20. Fresno State by 4, 41-37. They beat Indiana by 1, 30-29. 2 SEC teams lost in close fashion to these guys as well, as they lost to Mississippi State by 3, 26-23, and Missouri by 4, 23-19.
23-19! We have a 23-19!
And then, yeah, they beat Wake Forest by 8. They beat Washington by 15, and they also beat Wisconsin by 5. Texas Tech is probably the most accurate in what they would do against the simulator, I would think, because Texas Tech was a really good team. I mean, they had the record to prove it. They beat some high-quality teams as well in the actual 2022 season, and this kind of proves it in the pudding. So, yeah, good record for Texas Tech, and also the first team to get over 90 wins. However, Texas Tech did not finish at the top of the conference. There's 5 other teams up there, but still an impressive 6th place. All right, now we're into the top 5, and in 5th place, it's our first team to hit over the century mark in terms of wins. And this one kind of makes sense because the program is one of the most elite programs in the country. They won a lot of conference titles. They have a few national championships. However, they had one bad season this year, and the simulator shows that it was a fluke because this team is still pretty good, and that would be Oklahoma. And I mean, Oklahoma had a bad year when it came to conference play, but still an impressive record. Oklahoma finished with a record of 102 wins and 26 losses, which also include a 5-8 record against the Big 12. Now, the games of notice, and we'll start with the losses. They get thumped by Arizona State 35-14. The SEC was not their friends when it came to losses, as they lose to Florida 41-30, Georgia 47-14, and LSU 41-17. And then they've got a couple boneheaded losses in here as they lose to Rice 27-24, and they get blown out by San Jose State 38-17, which that makes no sense. Noticeable wins. They beat Alabama 43-21, which that's kind of surprising. They absolutely kill former Big 12 opponent Colorado 30-3, which that actually makes a lot of sense. They squeak by Kentucky 19-17, and they also squeak by Missouri 24-23. Let's see, a few squeakers here as we've got Oklahoma beating Penn State by 4, 24-20. They get by Pitt 20-14. SMU by 4, 42-38, and South Carolina by 7, 27-20. Now, looking at this shows that this year was kind of a fluke. I mean, if you think about it in retrospect, think of Texas when they went from the 2021 season to the 2022 season. Had a terrible year in 2021, losing to teams that they shouldn't have lost to, and they finally bounce back, go to a bowl game, and kind of get back to their groove of being, that type of university. This just proves that Oklahoma was in the same boat. It was a fluke this year, and there's a good chance they're going to be good next year. But yeah, unfortunately, it sucks that Oklahoma did not finish at the top, but still a top 5 finish. They finished in 5th place. All right, next up at number 4, we've got a team that actually did pretty well this year and did really well when it came to the simulator. In fact, probably has one of the best conference records so far compared to some of these other teams. And yeah, I know I hate to say it, but these guys were for real this past season, as number 4 was Texas. The Longhorns finished with a win-loss record of 105 wins and 23 losses, including a 9-4 record versus the Big 12. Also, I realized that Texas's 4 losses, all of them were 1-score games. Games of notice that they lost, which isn't a lot. They lost to Duke 31-20. They get creamed by LSU 52-20, and then bounce back with more close losses as they lose to Michigan by 6. They lose to Missouri by 4, and then they lose to Notre Dame by 4. And then more blowouts, as there was a loss to SMU 41-20, and they also get blown out by Tennessee 34-6. Now to their wins, and we're going to start this off with Arkansas. As, my God, this is a rivalry that goes all the way back to the early 1900s, and probably earlier than that. But the fact of the matter is, this is a basketball scoreline, as Texas blows out Arkansas 72-42. Now let's see. More comfortable wins, more shutouts, more blowouts. They won 2 close games against Miami first, and they won that one by 4, 27-23. And they also won a close one against Michigan State, 16-14. They get a good win over Texas A&M, 23-14. And they also win comfortably over USC, 37-17. My gosh, Texas did really well, and Texas is kind of legit. I know it's sad to see them go. Who am I kidding? I'm glad they're leaving. But still, their record against the simulator was really impressive. In fact, if it was a 4-team playoff just on this conference alone, Texas would get into the playoff by 3 victories. But still, didn't have enough to win the conference, but still an impressive 4th place. All right, here we go. Probably people are going to complain about this, but I don't care. So, taking the bronze medal and finishing in 3rd place, my gosh, this team had an impressive year, even though they lost the bowl game. But still, when it came to going against the simulator, things just went absolutely crazy. And this is the first team that doesn't have more than 20 losses, which, wow, this is crazy. And me being a little bit on the bias here, but I love that this is happening, and that is Kansas. Also put on top of it, KU finished with an above 500 record against the Big 12, which says a lot. KU finished with a win-loss record of 109 wins and 19 losses, including a 7-6 record versus the Big 12. Now to the losses of notice, and this list is really, really short. They lost to Alabama by 19, 41-22, which that surprises me. They lost close against Florida State, 31-26. Again, what? The SEC was not KU's favorite friend, as the next 2 teams they lose to were from the SEC, as they lost to the national champion Georgia Bulldogs, 34-20. And the LSU Tigers, 41-27. And yeah, there wasn't that many big upsets that KU lost, but there was a couple, as KU lost to SMU by 13, 30-17, and they also lost to Tulane by 7, 35-28. Now to the wins. Any win that KU has in this situation, I would consider it a great win. They beat both Arizona schools. They beat Arizona by 4, 52-48. And Arizona State also by 4, 21-17. They blow out Colorado 38-10, which that feels pretty stinking good. And the next 2 teams that they beat of significance were blowouts, and it's just surprised on how they beat them because of their caliber. The first team they blow out was Iowa, and they beat them 45-6. And then they beat Kentucky in blowout fashion, 55-7. Then it just gets crazier with the games they win. They beat Miami by 21, 45-24. They upset Michigan 31-30. They beat Michigan State 35-17. And they beat Minnesota 27-6. However, these next 2 wins, they're more in blowout fashion, but these feel good to my heart. As KU beats Missouri 40-21, and they also beat Nebraska 48-10. And now we go to the elite programs, which just make no sense on how KU beat them in this fashion. But they beat Notre Dame by 27, 48-21. They beat Ohio State by 1, 49-48. And they also beat Oregon by 11, 37-26. They beat Texas A&M in comfortable fashion, 52-31. And they also beat UCLA in comfortable fashion, 45-23. And also USC in incredible fashion, 40-13. I mean, if that is the case, that KU has this impressive record, then I like our chances going into the future. But it's hard for me to believe that just a bit. But still, I'm pretty impressed with how well KU did against the simulator. In fact, that they made the podium is really impressive. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased that KU takes home the bronze medal for finishing in 3rd. All right, taking the silver medal in 2nd place is a team that should make a lot of sense. because, well, this team had an incredible season and also finished as the Big 12 champions. That's right, I'm talking about Kansas State. And yeah, I get it, K-State finished with a better record than KU, but it was a little bit closer than a lot of people think. But in terms of their conference record against KU, it was a landslide. Kansas State finished with a record of 112 wins and 16 losses, including an 11-2 record versus the Big 12. In fact, I'm just going to go through the losses of notable that wasn't on their schedule. They lost to Arizona by 7, 31-24. They lost to LSU by 10, 20-10. Lost to Michigan by 6, 16-10. They get absolutely demolished by Ohio State, 43-17. And the final 3 losses they had were squeakers. In fact, 2 of them I would consider pretty significant upsets, which was SMU by 4, 38-34, and Stanford by 1, 22-21. And the other one that they lost that I would consider an upset was Washington State by 4, 34-30. Now to the wins of noticeable. They squeaked by Arkansas by 2, 22-20. They get a close win over Clemson, 17-9. And I put this one in here for significance because of the scoreline. But they thumped Eastern Michigan. Here's the score. 52-2. 2 points. Wow. And this one will hit the strings of every K-State fan because they played Nebraska and they beat the Cornhuskers by 50. They beat them by a final score of 70-20. They get by and upset Tennessee 34-33. They beat Texas A&M by 17, 27-10. They beat USC by 18, 28-10. They get by Utah by 4, 17-13. And also squeaked by Wisconsin only by 2, 12-10. Yeah, this doesn't surprise me. K-State is on the incline to do great things with this conference and probably run away with this thing. But it surprises me that the conference champion did not finish in first place, which, I mean, second place isn't too bad, but still that means you're technically the first loser. Yeah, but with that said, give K-State props for getting the silver medal by finishing in second. And finally, taking the gold in first place. I mean, wow. This team had an incredible year. Unfortunately, they lost in the conference championship, but they made it all the way to the national championship game before they ultimately lost and got blown out. But still, this team had an incredible year, and this was TCU. Not only that, since I did say that we were counting all their wins but not their losses, this is the first and only team to finish undefeated against the conference. TCU finished with an overall record of 114 wins and 14 losses and went a perfect 13-0 against the Big 12. So let's go to their losses of significance and just go through them all. They lose to Appalachian State by 11, 37-26. They lose to Auburn by 18, 41-23. They lose to Cal, 48-38. They had some struggles against the Florida schools as they lose to both Florida and Florida State. We'll start with the Gators. They lose that one by 9, 31-22. And then they lose to the Seminoles by 10, 38-28. Their only significant blowout loss besides the game against Georgia was Penn State, as the Nittany Lions creamed the Horned Frogs 55-23. To the wins, my gosh, they beat Alabama by 1, 24-23. They beat LSU by 16, 29-13. A couple more blowout wins as they beat NC State 58-7, as well as beating Notre Dame 66-10. Even more squeaker wins as they get by Texas A&M by 1, 28-27. They get by UCLA by 5, 35-30, and also Utah by 3, 34-31, as well as Virginia 28-24. The rest just came out as blowouts, even shutouts, in fact some weird score lines as well. But again, this team really improved over the last couple seasons, and since they made it to the national championship game, I mean, this kind of was obvious that these guys were going to probably have the best record, but still, it really impresses me how well this team did. So, yeah, with that said, congrats to TCU for taking the gold and finishing in first place. All right, that's going to do it for the Big 12 versus the FBS simulator. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Also, which results kind of surprised you. Also, leave a like, share, and subscribe, and push that notification bell, and tell your friends about these videos. And I should see you again when the next one comes out. But until then, have a good day. Never ever bring exotic dancers to the field house, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.